Yeah, definitely. Glad to be here. Hi, everybody. I've been developing in the crypto space since about 2017. First project was like a uh, NFT marketplace for memes and meme authorship. That was kind of how I got into the space initially, just a fun project. Since then, have been tinkering in this space on the side for many years. My professional career has been in financial product management and technology evolution at large organizations. Spent time at a brokerage helping them build out their crypto exchange. And then after that, ended up founding my own company in the crypto space and have been doing that for the past couple of years. And so still heavily involved in the design space. I do a lot of security work, help run a couple different security communities. And then, of course, also trying to stay up on the latest and help write standards for the space as we evolve.
That's awesome. Welcome, bro. For anyone who's new that joined, please, you could raise your hand and then we'll get to you in terms of an intro. D, do you want to take it away?
Yeah, sure. Hey, guys. My name's Dee. Really nice to be here. I've been observing the space for a few weeks or months already. Been really interested in 6551. Recently, we started co-building with Spartan Labs on a discovery platform for 6551 projects. So really nice to be here. If you guys are building the space and you have a project you're planning to launch or already launched, feel free to reach out to us and we will feature or list you guys on our platform. And we have other development in the plan, and we're going to share along the journey here as well. Thank you.
Awesome. Welcome, D. Anyone else first time here or didn't get a chance to introduce themselves in the last few calls or the last call? Going once, going twice. Okay. Sounds good. So yeah, as always, we're it's awesome to have everybody here show up. We're based in Vancouver, Canada, so it's 8 a.m. for us. I know for folks like in Asia, this is like midnight. So thanks again for staying up and being part of these weekly dev calls. Just so everyone knows, these calls are recorded 7 p.m. Nice. And we'll be we're gonna upload them all onto like a YouTube or something, so that people can rewatch it. We typically share that link afterwards anyway. So without further ado, I'm gonna pass it to Jaden to kind of provide some updates on the EIP. I think he's has a few things that he wanted to go over with everybody, and then I think Angela and BJ are here, so they might have some updates around the docs and the SDK stuff that's relevant.
Awesome. Well, yeah, thank you so much for coming, everybody. Really appreciate having everybody on these weekly dev calls. Great to see what people are building and everything. So we can do demos if you are working on a project and want to demo, show off some of the work that you've done this past week, or to show off some things you're building off. Feel free to. So we've been working on some updates to the EIP over the last couple of weeks to address a lot of the feedback we've got. There's been some really great feedback in the ETH Magicians forum. And so we've incorporated a lot of that feedback into a draft EIP. It's not merged in yet, but wanted to give folks kind of a quick peek at some of the changes that we're planning to come down the pipe. They're still kind of in flux a little bit, but we'd love to get some feedback and thoughts from folks like you guys who are building on the standard. So I'll share my screen here, and we can run through some of the new changes coming down the pipe. All right, so let me know when y'all can see my screen here.
Yep, all good.
Awesome. So nothing is changing with the structure of 6551. The structure stays the same, where there are ERC 721 contracts out there. There's all these NFT contracts out there. There's all these holders of NFTs. What 6551 does is it specifies one registry, a single registry deployed to a single address that deploys all Tokenbound accounts. And this registry creates a bunch of Tokenbound accounts. So these accounts are owned by NFTs. They're not owned by wallets. They're owned by NFTs. but the user that owns the NFT has kind of transitive ownership of the wallet. So while they own the NFT, they are the wallet owner. If they ever transfer the NFT, they are no longer the wallet owner, the new holder is. And then all of this is powered by implementations, which are contracts that implement the ERC-6551 account interface. That's where most of the changes have been made. There was a couple of things that were kind of, were hard for folks to work with, and just, folks who wanted to use 6551 for their use cases were having a hard time with. So the registry stays exactly the same. There's the create account and account functions. No new changes there. The changes for this come at the account interface level. So the first and the biggest one is there used to be an owner function that was required for every single ERC-6551 account. You had to provide an owner function, kind of like you're used to if you've used OpenZeppelin's Ownable or EIP 173. There's an owner function that returns a wallet address, but folks were having a bit of a hard time using that. It kind of breaks, strictly enforces this concept of a single owner of the account that is a wallet, when that's not really the goal of 6551. 6551 accounts aren't owned by wallets, they're owned by tokens. And so in order to kind of make that clearer, we've removed the owner function from this interface. You can still implement an owner function. That's totally fine if you want to do that in your implementation. Our implementation will continue to implement the owner function, but it's no longer required on the account. And importantly, it should no longer be used as an authorization check on the account. So if you are trying to interact with an ERC-6551 account that is using an implementation, like an unknown implementation, you can't rely on having that owner method anymore. So instead, there is a isValidSigner method. It kind of takes this concept of an owner and turns into the concept of a signer. So by default, the owner of the token that owns this account is a valid signer. And then account implementations can whitelist additional signers to be valid on the account. But by default, it's the owner of the NFT. And so basically all authorization checks, instead of being done through the owner function, which is what they were kind of being done before, but that got a little bit unwieldy because if an implementation wanted to allow delegation, for example, where the owner of an NFT could delegate access to to another wallet, the single owner method didn't quite fit that. So there's this new isValidSigner. You can pass in a signer and you can pass in additional context data. This is an optional field. You don't have to pass in. It can be passed in as empty bytes. But for account implementations that want to have like context-dependent authorization, so you're allowed to use this account only for certain operations if you're the holder of an NFT. This provides the mechanism to do so. So we've removed the owner function from the account interface. It's no longer required, although you can definitely implement it. And we've added this isValidSigner field so that you can perform validation checks. The last thing is there used to be a function called knots on the account. And the original design for knots was to provide a way for external contracts to introspect whether changes have happened on the account contract. So a big use case for this is marketplaces, right? One thing you might want to do at a marketplace level is say, okay, this order will only go through if the account for this NFT hasn't changed. No NFTs have been pulled out of this account. And so we had this knots field. The goal is to kind of align with, kind of the expectation of like EOAs having a nonce and 437 accounts having a nonce. But it ultimately just kind of providing, it was a bit cumbersome because of the way that nonces are handled with 437 and nonces are handled with other smart contract wallets. There's kind of some conflicts there. But also it's the concept, what we really want to do is expose the state of the account, right? Has anything about the account changed? And a nonce is a pretty specific thing, right? It's auto incrementing value, increments every time. Whereas, if you wanted to do something like hash-based, that would be a little bit odd from a nonce perspective. So we renamed this value to state, partially to make sure that it doesn't conflict with other smart contract account implementations, which makes it easy for account implementations from other projects to implement the 6551 interface, as well as it provides a little bit more flexibility for people who are implementing accounts to choose what kind of value is returned from the state. Now, another important thing about this change is there used to be an execute call function in this interface. It used to be required to implement execute call as a part of the account interface, which would allow valid signers, would allow the holders of NFTs to execute transactions using this. That function is no longer in the required 6551 account interface. And the reason for that is there's currently many different execution interfaces. There's many different ways to talk to a smart contract account and get it to execute a transaction. So there's the Gnosis Safe. They have an exec transaction function that has a whole bunch of arguments. There's ERC725X, which has its own way of handling that. There's the way that the accounts in the 457 examples repo handle execution, and then the execute call function that we had in here was another interface. So there's lots of competing like interfaces for that right now. And the way that we see it, it's very likely that that interface will become standardized over time. EIP 6900 is doing some work to standardize things in a similar area. It's likely that kind of the ways that a smart contract account works in terms of how you execute against it will become a little bit more standardized. And so we wanted to avoid making that into the 6551 account interface. Because if there is a newer standard that comes along and everybody migrates to that, then people who want to support 6551 have to support these two execution paths, which gets a little messy. So what we did was, instead of the execution interface being defined in the account interface, we separated it out into its own interfaces. So every Tokenbound account, every 6551 account implementation has to support at least one execution interface. It doesn't have to be this one, although we included an interface that you can use if you would like to, just to give an example of what an executable interface looks like. But you have to include at least one. So if you're building like a Gnosis Safe implementation, you can use the Gnosis Safe execution interface as long as you use interface detection to communicate to callers of your contract that that's the interface you support. Similarly for any other kind of execution interface. So what this will do is this will allow smart contract accounts that are compatible with 6551 to use whatever execution interface they want to. And this kind of lets EIP 6551 be forwards compatible with any upcoming standards in this area. Because the way that we kind of are reading the tea leaves, there's very likely to be standards upcoming in terms of the way that smart contract accounts are structured and should be structured. And so this kind of lets us be forwards compatible without having to reference any early standards in that regard. So those are the big changes. This largely only affects you if you are building custom account implementations. If you're working on your own custom smart contract account as a part of your project that implements the 6551 interface and works with 6551, these are some changes coming down the pipe that you'll probably want to make to the contracts that you're working on. If you are not implementing a custom interface, you're just using our interface, the Tokenbound accounts implementation that we've released, we're going to be releasing an update that has all of these updates. And so you'll be able to have your existing users upgrade their account to this new interface, and so it'll just be compatible with all the tooling out of the box. We're also planning to support the old interface in all of our tooling. So if your users decide not to upgrade, it'll still be supported. So that's kind of the big thing. If you're building custom implementations, there's now some slightly different ways that the interfaces should be. And if you're using our implementation, you can upgrade to it. The other thing is that until EIP 6551 is finalized, the registry address is still in flux. So right now, there's a registry address that's documented in the Tokenbound docs, and that's kind of where all the 6551 accounts are being deployed to. That registry address will likely change before this EIP is finalized. And what that means is every NFT will get a new address space, a new set of account addresses that it can use. And those will, when the EIP is finalized, those new addresses will become the canonical ones, and the ones that currently exist will still exist. You can still use them. You can still interact with them. Our tooling will still support them. But they'll be like, it'll be kind of like, how, like CryptoPunks was an early NFT project, but it's like very different in structure from, the NFTs that we have today. You can still use it on exchanges, but it's just like subtly different. The old Tokenbound accounts, kind of the current Tokenbound accounts, will fall into that category. So there will be an upgrade path for people who are using the current account. We'll provide that. But there will be kind of a new set of addresses, a new set of accounts with a new registry that will be kind of like the canonical 6551 accounts. So those are the changes coming down the pipe. We're planning to merge this in very soon. We're just finalizing some things as authors, and then we'll be able to get this merged into the EIP repo. We'll do some announcements, and we will, provide updates to the tooling and everything so that folks can interact with it. Would love any questions, feedback, thoughts on these changes. We've been talking a lot about them as authors so far, but would love to start getting some feedback from from you guys who are here in the community joining these calls every week.
Jaden, do you want to mention some of the authors that are added on?
Yes, absolutely. For sure. So we've added a few new sets of authors to the EIP. The first is the Gnosis Mech team has joined as authors. They've been doing some really cool experiments with Gnosis Mech. We kind of both stumbled across this idea of accounts tied to an NFT at the same time. And so they've joined as authors. Mech is planning to support 6551, and we're kind of helping to shape the standards so that we can kind of converge Gnosis Mech and 6551 into one and the same thing. So really happy to have Aaron and Jan Felix on board there. Additionally, there's some folks from 1inch, so Anton Burkov and Mikhail from 1inch. They were also working on some similar things using in a previous EIP that just never made it past the draft phase, or never actually made it to the point of being an EIP. It was a PR. But anyways, they did some initial exploration work on this as well, and so have a lot of insight that has been super helpful. So we've been jamming with them. They've been added as authors as well. And finally, the folks from Revest Finance who have been doing some NFT bound wallets in the context of a DeFi protocol, and they've been contributing some really interesting ideas around ephemeral 6551 accounts. So what if you had a 6551 account that got destroyed at the end of every transaction and recreated at the beginning of each? They're building some things in 6551 that use that paradigm, and so they've been super helpful refining some of the ideas. So we've got some new authors to welcome to the group. They've contributed a ton. Like this new update to the IP comes a lot from the comments we've gotten on the ETH Magicians forum. I think this addresses pretty much all of the comments that we've received there, but also comes from lots of long conversations with the folks who have come on board as authors. So hugely grateful to them.
And one question for you, Jaden. I'll kind of like kickstart it, but I think you've mentioned with this new registry, everyone gets a new account. So how should people be thinking about, especially folks here building like dApps that are pulling in Tokenbound accounts? Like, how should they be thinking about multi-account, multi-implementation?
Yeah, that's a good question. So we talk a lot about 6551 giving every NFT a wallet, right? And that's true. Every NFT gets a wallet with 6551, but that is a little bit of a simplification. Every NFT actually gets as many wallets as it wants to, right? And this is by design. We actually clarified this in this draft EIP, but the goal of this EIP is to give every NFT the same rights as any other Ethereum user. So that means that NFTs should be able to self-custody assets. NFTs should be able to execute transactions. NFTs should be able to have multiple accounts and multiple different types of accounts. And NFTs should be able to. There was another point in there, but part of being an Ethereum user is having the ability to have multiple accounts, right? You, as an Ethereum user, you might have a MetaMask wallet and a Rainbow wallet and a Gnosis Safe and an Argent wallet. You can have all these different wallets with all these different implementations. We want to give NFTs the same ability because we think that the ability for you as the user, in this case, the NFT is the user, to have full sovereignty over those kind of choices is important. So if you're building dApps on 6551, just know that NFTs will have multiple accounts. You don't have to support that new dApp. Your dApp can kind of be scoped to a single NFT and a single account. That's totally fine. We're planning to have the Tokenbound Explorer support as many accounts as it can. But in your dApps, there might be users who have many accounts for a given NFT. You might be able to use that in your dApps in really interesting ways, where you can have a whole collection of NFT accounts for a single NFT and let users interact with them that way. So by the nature of 6551 is that every NFT can have many accounts. And so with this new migration, this just means that every NFT gets a kind of another set of accounts that they can use. They go from having already having the ability to have many accounts to just kind of maintaining that ability to have many accounts. And so if you're building on 6551 right now, that's super awesome. Like I said, we're going to provide an upgrade path so the accounts that have already been deployed, if you're using the Tokenbound implementation, can be upgraded to use the new interface. So it'll work with any tooling that supports the finalized interface once the interface gets finalized. And then you can also, if you want to start treating the accounts from the new registry as kind of canonical in your app and migrating things over to those new accounts, you can totally do that. You don't have to, because the old accounts will continue to exist, right? They're They're self-sovereign. Nobody owns them except the NFT holder, so your users can continue to use them. But you will get the best support from switching over to the new registry once it's finalized. There is a period of time between now and when it's finalized, so I wouldn't worry about making the switch too hurriedly. But once the EIP is finalized and the final registry is baked in, that would be the point when switching over would make sense.
Awesome. And it's important to know that Jaden, the old addresses, you can still use it, right? You can still wallet connect. You can if I've had things inside of the old account, a Tokenbound account address, it still works, right?
Yeah, of course. That's the whole point of 6551 is that your NFT gets a wallet that can't be taken away from you. It's fully self-sovereign. It's fully owned by you, the NFT holder. Nobody can stop you from using it. And so all of the existing Tokenbound accounts that have been deployed through the registry, and all of the accounts that could potentially be deployed, right? These will still continue to work. It's kind of like the 457 entry point, right? There's been a couple of versions of the entry point. You can still use an old version of the entry point if you want to. It's just the support among bundlers isn't as good anymore. It'll be similar here. Like you can still use the smart contracts of the old registry. You can still use the current implementation. And users of your dApps will be able to just continue to do that with no interruptions if you're building on 6551 right now. But as new versions of the registry get released, it'll be kind of like the 457 entry point where the majority of traffic moves over to that. What's an example of how multiple accounts can be used? This is a good question. Yeah, so this is an interesting idea that we've been experimenting with, and I'm not sure if this is the best example, but this is something we've been thinking about. So you can kind of have special purpose accounts where different accounts have different implementations and they do different things. So you could have one account that's just like fully self-sovereign, the NFT holder owns everything, and you can do whatever you want with it. And then you can have another account that's slightly restricted, right? It's got some rules about it. So you could have, it could be like a savings account where you can deposit assets into the savings account, but you can't withdraw them for 30 days, right? And in those 30 days, they'll earn interest. So that other account would enforce some different rules on deposits and withdrawals, but it would still let you sign messages. It will still let you execute transactions that don't touch the assets that are saved. And so multiple different accounts that you have multiple different types of accounts. So accounts that have different functionality and different implementations. You also have multiple accounts of the same implementation. And so a couple of examples of that would be if somebody wanted to use like kind of stealth accounts for an NFT, they could pick a really random salt, and that will give you a unique address. But until that account is deployed, nobody knows which address that NFT belongs to. So that address can receive assets that are owned by the NFT in kind of a secret way. Nobody really knows that NFT owns those assets. And the person who generated that random salt has to create the account, and then everybody knows that that NFT owns those assets. So you can kind of do like shielded ownership of assets for NFTs using like stealth accounts. That's an example of having multiple accounts for NFT. Another one will be vanity addresses. So you could have kind of your default address, which has a salt of 0, and then you could have a vanity address where you generate a random salt that gives you like a really nice account address with like 5 leading zeros or something like that. So you can have multiple different types of accounts. Each account can have different characteristics. It's a pretty wide play space if you're building dApps on top of this to be able to experiment with multiple accounts. But you don't have to, right? You can always kind of treat you can always kind of have like a default account in your dApp. It's not specified in the spec, but essentially so far the practice has been the account with a salt of 0 for a given implementation is the default. And so if you go to the Tokenbound site, what you're seeing is an account with the Tokenbound implementation and a salt of 0. And very soon we'll be releasing support for multiple different account implementations on the Tokenbound site. So you'll be able to see all the different accounts that your NFT owns.
Cool. I think we could switch it up to BJ or Angela if you have any updates you want to share around the SDK or docs.
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in. I guess one thing to note is that a bunch of members of the team have jumped over from external projects to working internally on tokenbound.org. So we're doing a whole bunch of work about setting up new foundations there, increasing the pace of development, accelerating feature development, and allowing that kind of work to patch back into our work on the SDK and docs. So I think you're going to see tighter cycles for development between Tokenbound.org and the SDK and documentation. And the pace is just going to pick up a little bit, which I think is exciting. A couple of features that are coming soon. I don't know if I'm supposed to mention this necessarily, but the ERC20 and ETH transfers are in the pipeline, and we recently launched transferring NFTs as a feature on Tokenbound.org. With respect to the SDK, I've been working pretty heavily on that over the past month or so. We have a PR right now for doing transaction testing. So I've been doing a lot of work to get testing into the repo and make sure that we're really buttoned down with testing. So there are no surprises. We've been testing up to this point mostly read functions, and we're making it so that all of the transactions will have tests as well. And that'll add a little bit of work into the development cycle, but it will really pay off moving forward as we start doing a lot more transaction integration in the SDK and making it easier for people to do more complex transactions. Some of the other work is just polishing return types to meet Jadon's spec updates and so on. I think a big thing also that I would call out is the Telegram working group and its usefulness in helping polish out the docs. We've been having lots of amazing feedback across the Telegram group from people who are asking questions or providing input or insights. And that all goes a long way to contribute to highlighting where some of the gray areas are on the documentation. And I know for me personally, I've been jumping in and making little edits almost on a daily basis to areas of the docs that require a little bit of clarification here or there, or ways of wording things to make it a little bit easier for people to grok what it is that's going on, or to allow people to think about 6551 and the work that we're doing in a more straightforward light. Yeah, so long story short, Tokenbound.org is seeing a lot more active development from more members of the team at this point, and the features are going to be coming much more quickly in the next months.
Awesome. Thank you, PJ. That's great. Angela, is there anything you want to share with the community?
Yeah, actually, nothing more that I would add in there. I mean, everything that BJ and Jaden and Benny mentioned. I can share like the updates on the docs and like slight changes in the structures that you all might see going forward. So there are like new additions of guides now. I'll just share the link. I unfortunately cannot share my screen right now, but like there are things like new guides in there. There is now a showcase page, and if you're building on Tokenbound and if you're building with ERC 6551, we'd love to see your project in the showcase. So feel free to either raise a PR or raise an issue in the documentation repository. There are instructions on the showcase page, or just feel free to DM me or just post it in the Telegram group chat as well. Apart from these three things, there's also one new repository called Awesome Tokenbound. That is for all of the all of the projects that you might have seen on built around Tokenbound, or any of the example repositories that we put together. So I'm going to share that as well over here. You can feel free to raise a PR there as well. There's already a PR up. I just saw it this morning, so that's great. And yeah, and that is it. So the last final thing that I would share is the documentation repository itself, which is where you can raise a PR to maybe either fix something in the documentation, anything that you would like to see in there, or add your project in the showcase. So all of this is still a work in progress, and more changes would be coming in sooner. So, but yeah, this is just to share like what are the new changes that have happened in the past week, and we'll be sharing more updates in the calls ahead. So yeah, that is it.
Awesome. Thank you, Angela. One other person I want to pass it to is Jason. So Jason, you were in Paris, now you're in Dubai, world traveler. But yeah, how was ETH Global Paris? You guys were sponsoring a bounty for 6551, like, and you led a workshop. Love to hear more about it.
Yeah, I would say first of all, ETH Paris the whole week. ECC was really high energy. A lot of people asking us questions about 6551. At the ETH Global Hackathon, there were at least a dozen projects that I know of that built on 6551. There were 6 in particular that used our technology AirStack along with 6551 to index 6551s and display them. I'll show one in particular that was one of our grand prize winners in a second. And the others actually that we met them all because everyone was super interested. People come by us. We had like a sign that ask us about 6551. People were also asking us questions just about how to deploy 6551 contracts, and we were doing our best, even outside of like our team's specialty, to help them and then to refer them to the great documentation and the Tokenbound team. I'd say that we also have the projects that didn't use AirStack. The biggest reason they didn't was because we don't support testnets yet. We're just Ethereum Polygon mainnet. So there's actually a couple of really cool other projects that were just on testnets with 6551 that I can direct you to as well. One project in particular that I'll just point out real quick, if I could share my screen. I think somebody's giving me permissions. All right. This was, let me go here. Yeah. So if everyone sees my screen, Joseph, you see my screen, yes? Yeah, okay. So Project Arbora did a really nice job. They built a visualization engine for 6551s that were able to traverse the entire tree. So it's a NFT owning a 6551 that owns other NFTs, that owns other 6551s. And just show everyone some examples of this. Their example was for supply chain and for having various parts that go into the overall kind of vehicle. And if you see here, they had this, and this is from live data, kind of how these traverse, that the plane was made up of these parts that had these NFTs that also had 6551s that are kind of subparts. And they also built a really cool feature to be able to merge NFTs into another 6551, which was really cool as well. If anyone's interested, I'll post in the Tokenbound channel the GitHub from the project, also the queries that they did to be able to get this whole tree. Really nice stuff. And then just the last thing I'll say on this is there's also a couple cool projects that are working with Lens and 6551. And we're working closely with the Orb team, which you might have seen yesterday, made some announcements of what they're doing in 6551. And very excited to help them kind of, they're building basically this experience where a Lens user, which is an NFT in the first place, Lens account, can own a 6551 that then could have memberships and then sub-memberships and roles and kind of capabilities within that. And then to be able to show all the 6551s and assets that are owned by them at the user level or at the kind of browsing level, suddenly we're working with them. So a lot of really cool stuff of how you enable people to browse and traverse the entire multi-layer tree of 6551s.
That's awesome. Thanks, Jason. I know that for ETH Paris, there was you guys at AirStack and Wallet Connect, and I believe ApeCoin also had a bounty. So it'd be great if you have that list, Jason, of all the submissions to share it in the working group, and then Angela and the team can probably add it to the showcases as well. So that's super cool. It's you know, I remember me and Jaden went to Lisbon for we were co-sponsoring with Lens earlier part of the year for ETH Global Lisbon, and there were like 4 projects, and then we had our own prize at ETH Waterloo, and there was like I don't know, like 12 plus submissions, and then now ETH Global Paris, it's like 3 different bounties, and I'm sure there was a lot of submissions. So we're going to be at ETH Global New York. I think that's the next one we'll be at. So we'll love to see meet y'all if you guys are coming to ETH Global New York. Cool. So I think we're at a good time now to switch to questions. If you have burning questions that you've been thinking of for the last week, or if you have a demo, even if it's not fully working, if it's a Google Slides or something, we always encourage people throwing ideas out there. So yeah, any questions, demos, just raise your hand if you want to show something or ask questions. That way we know who to go to first. So Vishwa, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I don't have a demo though. So if somebody has a demo, I'd love to give them the floor before, in case we don't have time. If not, I'll ask my question anyway.
Yeah, go for it.
So I was just doing a little bit of experimenting over the past week, and there was something which occurred to me that could be an apparent architectural flaw. So I was thinking within the context of a flash loan, right? So if I'm on the borrowing side, if I borrow your Tokenbound account, within the flash loan contract itself, I think the collateral here, or the asset that's being lent out, would be the Tokenbound account, which is a 721. But I don't know if it provides for context in terms of what's inside the 4337 wallet within the 721. So me as a borrower, I could just drain that wallet and return it back, and the contract would still be a valid contract. So is there a way in which we can implement that lock on the wallet itself for something like this?
That's a good question. So I think this is similar to, there was some, I saw this when the ApeCoin drop happened, and there was a bunch of apes sitting in like NFT finance projects, and there were some flash loan attacks. I'm not sure if it's really attacks because it's kind of following the rules of the network, but essentially they flash loaned, borrowed the ape, claimed the ApeCoin, put the ape back into the lending protocol, and returned all the money. And so they were basically able to claim some tokens on behalf of an ape they didn't own, but an ape that was in a lending protocol. So these kinds of, is that kind of a similar style attack to what you're thinking of?
It's actually slightly different. So I would argue that that NFTs would, and especially lending on top of NFTs, is encouraging that behavior, right? Like you should be able to, if somebody wants to actually borrow your NFT and is willing to pay you to access an airdrop and you're okay with it, I think there's that particular transaction has implied trust, because specifically it's talking about just a 721 which doesn't have a wallet. Now I have a 721 which has a wallet, right? So while I could be using it as collateral for a flash loan, I might also have other assets sitting in that wallet, which I don't want to be a part of that particular transaction. And I think like it's kind of like MEV, right? If there's an opportunity for an exploit, it will happen. So this is something that came top of mind to me, because if we're enabling so much nesting, you could have a Tokenbound account and there could be 10 Tokenbound accounts inside it which hold a plethora of NFTs. Given that a lot of these things are going to go in the direction of DeFi and lending, this is one of those things which came to me, which was like, hang on a second, how can we provide like a little bit more safe architecture for this? And if you guys want to think it through together, happy to be a part of that conversation.
Yeah, so this is an interesting kind of like just nature of Tokenbound accounts thing, because every single NFT has a Tokenbound account. There's no such thing as an NFT that doesn't own a Tokenbound account. There's NFTs that own Tokenbound accounts that don't have anything in their Tokenbound accounts, but every single 721 comes with a Tokenbound account now, even if it just exists in this counterfactual state. And so this definitely like raises the issue of like for protocols and things and tooling and infrastructure that's been built around this concept of a 721 token as a self-contained object with no additional state, this kind of breaks that mold, right? And so we'll basically need to reconsider that whole concept as an ecosystem. Given that if 6551 does start to have a lot of adoption, then we'll have to reconsider that. But yeah, you're right. There's no real connection between the NFT and the Tokenbound account. Like the NFT can be traded independently of the Tokenbound account. The Tokenbound account just kind of follows wherever it goes. So yeah, there totally could be some implementation level things against this. Like if the NFT is like if it detects that there's a flash loan transaction happening, it could stop some things. I'm not entirely sure how you would implement that, but I think things like this will be the domain of protocols to protect against, and not the domain of the 6551 accounts to protect against. And there'll be kind of an interaction between the two, right? I think this might lean into what we're thinking around for the state function, right? Because every time you would do a transaction using a token-bound account, you would change the state of the account. So one way to protect against this type of attack in your protocol would be to do the action with the NFT, check the state before you do that action of the token-bound account that you care about, and then check the state after that action. And if the state has changed, you can revert the whole transaction, because you know that something during that transaction changed the state of the token-bound account in a way that you didn't want to. But I think this will be something that is part of the way that protocols have to build around handling ERC 721s, rather than something that will be built into the accounts, because I think this concept of account state is like that generic building block that protocols can build on to prevent this.
Is there a way to articulate substates? Because I think if you look at delta state, perhaps by design there will be a delta state if flash borrowing happens. But if there's like substates, which is okay, there was a what different states are we looking for, right? So has something been received? Has something been sent? If received as a part of this transaction, then it's okay and it doesn't require the transaction to be reverted. But if something was sent out, then that's against, so is that a protocol design thing, or is substate something that becomes within the context of the standard?
Yeah, that's a good question. We could definitely flesh this out a little bit more. Our thinking so far has been the value of state will change whenever a write transaction happens. So whenever the owner of the account takes an action, that's like a change of state. When you receive new tokens, we don't consider that a change of state, but it's like kind of write-only operations that change that state. So you kind of get that protection built in, right? If you check the state, you know that the state has changed because something the owner of the account has done has, changed has changed. Like largely, this is trying to track, like it's trying to be a proxy for value, right? If the account owner has removed something from the account, that's a change of state. That's like a value. But if someone has put something in, most protocols only need to care about like making sure that people don't lose value. If you gain additional value, that's not a huge thing. But yes, there's definitely like the state function is pretty wide open. So if you're implementing a token-bound account implementation, you can choose whatever value you want to return from that state. And so that that state value, you get a whole slot of you get a whole 32 bytes to express state. And so you can express it in whatever way you want. It could be an auto-incremented nonce. It could be a hash of all the transactions that have been executed. It could be like there could be like multiple sections that handle different things. So there's no definition for what that state has to be, as long as it does change whatever the state of the account changes. And hopefully that provides building blocks to fix this.
Perfect. I'm excited to show you guys maybe in the next couple of weeks what we've been kind of building through. I think now that Benny has mentioned that we can also share slides or presentations, I'll prepare one for next week, and hopefully there's time to go through it.
Amazing. Yeah, we would love that. And feel free to, if you want to chat like details about this, I feel like this could be a good conversation. So feel free to DM me or post it in the group.
I'll DM you on the back of this call. I think I have a couple of DMs that I got to send to D and Jason as well. So I'll do that all after the call.
Sounds great. Awesome. Anybody else who has some questions? Anybody else who wants to do a demo of things that are going on? We chatted a little bit about some of the changes coming down the pipe to the EIP. So if there's any feedback or comments on those changes, would love to hear them. Yeah, anything else? I take it that there's not too much, so feel free to raise your hand or whatever while I'm going through some things, and you can hop on the stage here. But one thing I do want to share that Orb announced, Jason was mentioning, Orb announced an integration with ERC 6551 the other day. So basically, they're using it to power their communities project. So they're kind of like building this concept of communities on top of Lens, because I don't think Lens has this like native concept of a community. And so Orb is building this, and what they're doing is they're using 6551 accounts for this. So you have your Lens profile NFT. It has a Tokenbound account address, and then your community memberships are represented as NFTs inside of your Tokenbound account. And so here's kind of an example. When this Lens handle joins all these different groups, they collect the membership NFTs for these groups. And then you've got an on-chain representation of your handles participation in these groups. This is a really cool milestone, actually, because when you think about this concept of NFTs owning other assets and how that applies to something like Lens, this concept of the Lens handle owning assets that represent its participation in the social network is really, really interesting. And as the Lens team is doing some explorations of what's coming next, like it's really cool to see that apps are starting to realize that this is a really natural pattern, right? Your handle owns all of your interactions rather than your wallet owning all of your interactions. So yeah, huge kudos to the Orb team. They've been building stuff. And if you haven't seen the 6551 Dune dashboard, a lot of the activity recently has been Polygon activity, and this started largely when Orb released this feature. So a lot of the more recent activity on 6551s has actually been powered by this Orb community feature, which is pretty cool. So yeah, huge kudos to the Orb team. They're doing great work. We've been chatting with them a little bit. So yeah, that's awesome to see. Cool. Any other thoughts, questions, things you want to chat through?
I think Jaden, I don't know if you want to. I mean, we've been doing a lot of research around L2. I mean, I think it's a crucial feature. Something that we wanted to put to the group is like envisioning where NFTs will ultimately live. I think there's like two. I mean, of course, there's many realities, but this is more food for thought, more of like an open discussion. One is like, do we believe that NFTs that have the most value or the most usability should be launched on mainnet, and then the functionality utility can be on an L2, or because everyone's launching an L2 now, maybe NFTs in the future, they all just kind of live in their own L2 app chains. Yeah, that's something that we've been thinking about a lot. Obviously, we don't have the answer, but it's important, I guess, from a token-bound account perspective, because it is kind of the account for NFTs. How do we kind of think about cross-chain? And Jaden, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about the research that we're doing, or like just high level like idea, or not ideas, but some of the parameters that we think are important.
Yeah, I think we've been thinking a lot about this concept of how do NFTs exist in this multi-chain world, right? If you kind of chart out a path to the future, we'll have all these different L2s and all these different app chains. Where do NFTs fit into all of that? And we've kind of seen two different approaches to this. One, which is the approach we've taken so far, is that NFTs live on one chain. They don't move across chains. They only live on one chain. And if you do use one of those NFT bridges that tries to move the NFT across chains, the NFT still stays on mainnet. There's still like that new NFT you get on the other chain isn't really the same NFT. It's a totally different NFT. But then there's the other perspective that like NFTs will cross chains regularly and they'll be bridged from chain to chain. So I'd be curious to hear folks' thoughts on whether like which pattern you see becoming most common in the Ethereum ecosystem. Will more folks be bridging their NFTs across chains and using their NFTs on other chains? Or will NFTs become kind of a single chain asset with something like the functionality of the NFT being what crosses the chain? So we've been thinking a lot about that, but also just kind of like, where are people going to launch NFTs in the future, right? Like where Is the majority of NFT traffic going to migrate to L2s, or is it going to stay on Ethereum mainnet? We don't really have the answers to that, but we've been doing a lot of thinking and exploration because one of the goals of 6551 is to allow NFTs to have cross-chain accounts. So you can have an NFT on mainnet owning assets on Polygon and taking actions on Polygon. So as we're working towards that future, we're doing a lot of thinking here. So we kind of put the question to everyone here. What are your thoughts on how NFTs will exist in the multi-chain world, and kind of that, like, whether NFTs will exist on one chain or will be bridged across many? I'd love to hear anyone's thoughts. Nice. Adam says embedding the NFTs will live mostly on the chain with the best provenance, likely mainnet, but functionality of that NFT will live on L2s. Cool. Yeah, I think that's kind of matching with ours. Vishwa, go for it.
So I guess in the context of like NFTs is just NFTs as we know them so far. Pretty likely that they would exist on one chain, just because there hasn't really been a reason for them to be on multiple chains just yet, right? Primarily we've had JPEGs as NFTs, so there hasn't really been a reason for JPEG to be on two different blockchains. But if you start to now think of token-bound accounts, which are essentially representations of people in their digital state, I can imagine there's going to be a need for them to live across multiple ecosystems, maybe not even just EVM ecosystems, perhaps even beyond. And so I think I agree with Adam where there's probably a high likelihood of, I guess, the citizenship being on Ethereum mainnet, but being able to have functionality and state across multiple blockchains is probably where I see NFTs headed in the direction.
Awesome. Yeah, I love that. Anyone else have thoughts on the subject?
I sent this idea to my team, but so basically we do kind of think that the identity related NFTs will sit on Ethereum, but I was asking the team if there was a way where, like, if an NFT is minted on a specific chain, because it can share the same address with multiple layer 2s, what if a dummy NFT existed on all those other chain with the same wallet address, and those are non-transferable, but when it's on that layer 2 without moving the original NFT, the functionalities just could work in those NFTs. So from a user standpoint, if they want to trade or transfer an NFT, they need to go to the chain that is where the original NFT is. On all the other chains, just an asset just exists, which is which holds the utility but cannot be in any way transferred. That's kind of the idea we're like looking into if it's possible.
Very cool. Go for it.
No, that was by accident. I was just applauding.
All good. Yeah, I always try to hit the emojis, but I hit the hand up thing too every time. Cool. Any other thoughts on that before we close it off? I know we've got 3 minutes left here, so we keep chatting about this, or we can say see you next week.
Just one last question. Is there some kind of contributor board or something that you guys have at 6551? If there's any stuff, particularly with like writing or perhaps some dApps that could be built on top as ideas, experiments, things that could help push the overall development of the EIP. If it exists, then would be happy to look at some of those jobs to be done.
Yeah, we're looking to build that out pretty soon. We don't have anything written down. We do have lots of ideas on like kind of requests for products, things we would like to see. So feel free, if you want to DM me afterwards, I can send you some of those, but we are planning to release like a full-on list of those in the docs fairly soon.
Sounds good.
Awesome. Cool. Anything else on your end?
Nope, I think we're good. So thanks everyone. This was I just did the count. I think, number 15 of the weekly dev call. So we've been doing this for 15 weeks now since the beginning. And so thank you all who've stuck around or joined midway. And there's a lot more coming. So yeah, we do this every week at 8 a.m. Pacific time. There is a link that I share in the Telegram that essentially allows you to add it to your calendar as a reminder. If not, just every Thursday morning before 8 a.m. I usually share a message. So yeah, thank you everyone for showing up, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks everybody.